Thank you for checking out this episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. You can find the podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you are just a straight up hater. You can follow me on social media over at pjordansec. You can email me at sportstalkphillipjordan@gmail.com. Everybody joining me as promised. You cannot see Taylor if you're watching the video, but he is there. You see a silhouette of a person and you see his name on the screen. But I am joined by Taylor Jones. He is the Auburn Wire managing editor over at USA Today. And Taylor, appreciate you coming on and talk about Auburn football.
Hey, thank you, Philip, for having me on. And yes, this confirms that I am here. Technology, as great as it is in 2023, also has its faults. So you won't be able to see me for this episode, but I'm definitely here and I'm excited to talk Auburn sports with you this week.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's technology. I mean, we had issues this week with the coaches show. It wanted to freeze up and do stuff. The audio was good, but the video was kind of lagging a little bit. But you know how it is. We have to use the internet to do all this stuff, but it's not always the most reliable thing in the world.
Yeah, absolutely not. But you just got to take the good with the bad and just keep rolling.
Yeah, so that kind of can jump us into Auburn football. I think take the good with the bad and just keep rolling. A little bit more bad than good now that they've lost 4 games in a row after starting 3-0, all in conference play. Just 28-21 loss coming out of the game against Ole Miss. There's opportunities there. It was tied 14 at halftime, but still Auburn is allergic to the forward pass, apparently, until right there at the end of the game. But just your overall thoughts coming out of Saturday night when Auburn's lost to Ole Miss.
Yeah, I've got to give props to them for making that game look a lot closer than it actually is. I believe it was almost 200 yards difference. I think there were, maybe 10 plays difference as well that the Ole Miss had. And of course, they won the time of possession battle as well, but Auburn found a way to make it 28-21. And we know we saw several good things on defense. I felt the defense kind of, held the wall back as much as they could. Shout out to Marcus Harris. Shout out to Jalen McLeod. And of course, the defensive backfield, Donovan Kaufman, as well as Zion Puckett getting some interceptions as well, keeping Auburn in it. Uh, Offensively, the quarterback battle is, still what it is from week one. I feel like we have learned absolutely nothing. I feel like we're no closer to finding who quarterback one is and who is going to stay quarterback one. Hugh Freeze mentioned something about it earlier this week in his press conference that, is Robbie Ashford an every down quarterback? We're not really sure yet, but he kind of alluded to, hey, we might, test out that theory this week. So curious to see if he does that and see what the result will be. But the good news is that as difficult as the first 4 games of the SEC slate were, the next 4 games should be a little easier coming in this weekend with Mississippi State, followed by Vanderbilt. And then, of course, you have New Mexico State mixed in there as well as Arkansas and Alabama. So a little bit easier slate, except right there towards the end as Alabama has found a way to get back into the SEC Western Division race. But you kind of, have a little bit of optimism there when you think of Auburn football and them trying to end the season on a positive note and possibly get to that 6-7 win threshold and get to a bowl game in Hugh Freeze's first season.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, if you said Auburn was 3-4, they lost to those teams, you could possibly, yeah, I can get that. First year head coach with Hugh Freeze, got to rebuild the roster. Obviously, the talent gap, and Hugh Freeze talked about it a lot. But I think, and you can give me your thoughts too. I think a big part of the contention with Auburn fans is just the passing game. We all thought Hugh Freeze coming in, Auburn would have a passing game. Uh, didn't think it'd be at a level where they're throwing 300 yards a game. We knew the receiver position needed development and needed more help, and quarterback was average, not great, but still, we thought Auburn would have a better passing game. But this part of it is just it's been a struggle, and even the part where he bringing Holden Gardner in there for the double pass. My thing on that, Taylor, was if you think he's good enough to throw that pass, why isn't he out there just regularly taking snaps at quarterback? So it's just I think that's like the biggest thing right now with Auburn is just how can he get this passing game going? And I don't think it's fully on the quarterbacks either. I think the receivers aren't helping at all either. But it's just it's kind of puzzling. You figured it would be better under Hugh Freeze.
Yeah, and listening to his press conference today too, I think he's kind of confused as well because it's hasn't been 1,000% the best. Of course, you think of the games with Chad Kelly and Bo Wallace and all that, and those tons and tons of NFL receivers that he's put out there. You think of AJ Brown, of course, having a great game for the Philadelphia Eagles on Sunday night, and DK Metcalf, and all those great guys that he had. Auburn doesn't have those yet, but you look at one, he doesn't have that one quarterback that he fully trusts in that situation. We've even seen, Robbie, running the football, he looks pretty good, but there are times where he throws a pass, you're thinking, okay, well, that's why he's not the starter. And then you look at Peyton Thorne and you kind of say the same thing where he can take off running. I think he's a better runner than I thought we were, but unfortunately, I think you have two quarterbacks right now that are run oriented. That's where their strong suits are. And of course, Hugh Freeze is a passing guy. We've seen that every stop that he's been at. And so he's a little confused right now. He, trotted out a different rotation of receivers. We saw Caleb Burton out there instead of Hollywood Hooks and Nick Mardner and all those tall guys. He's sending out Jay Fair, of course. Jay Fair's, been the consistent guy throughout. But trotting out new receivers, putting in Robbie Ashford in situations that aren't in the red zone. And he even mentioned a little bit of this too about the play calling. He said that Phillip Montgomery is still going to be our guy, but I approve all the game plans, and if I need to take over, I will. So I think it's just trying to find what works, and it's taking him a lot longer than he would like. Of course, he'll be the first one to tell you. And second of all, it's taken a lot longer for Auburn fans to kind of figure that out as well too. So he's just kind of flabbergasted at this moment. I feel like that'll change over the next couple of years. He may try to go in and get another quarterback in the portal. And of course, you have Walker White coming in too. He'll be, have a couple of years to get ready. A couple other receivers that will come in as well. So I think this is just, more on him right now, as it's not as easy as he thought that it would be. Or actually, I take that back. He knew that it was going to be difficult, but I don't know if he knew that it would be this difficult. And props to him for still trying to find ways of trying to make it work. We tried this, we tried that, it's not working. We like this instead of this. So it may take a little bit longer, but I think coming in at this time with this part of the schedule too, with Mississippi State coming in and Arkansas coming in, we saw how great of a game those two played over the weekend in Fayetteville. So I think over the next 2 or 3 weeks, things will slowly start to come together. And hey, who knows? We may see a completely different team when the guys from Tuscaloosa roll in November.
Yeah, that's true. Defensively, it was another case Saturday night. Look, the only time I really think Auburn did not play good on defense this season was against LSU. But who has played good defense against LSU? LSU was going up and down the field against everybody.
I mean, heck, even Ole Miss, they allowed a lot of points to LSU and they won the ball game. So yeah, you're exactly right there. Not a lot of teams have had defensive success against those boys.
I think the only team that can beat stop the Ole Miss offense is the Ole Miss offense at this point.
Hey, you're right.
But early on, Ole Miss had success. The tempo was giving Auburn trouble. There was a couple third downs where Auburn did off the field. But when you look at it from the stats from Saturday night, Ole Miss was 2 of 11 on third down. They were 2 of 4 on fourth down, which we know Lane Kiffin's going to do that. But the run game, I think it did get a hold of Auburn there in the fourth quarter. I mean, it wasn't 21-14 until right there at the end of the third quarter. So Auburn's right there in it. It did kind of feel like when it went 28-14, that kind of really took a lot of air out of the stadium. But Auburn's defense, they did what they had to do. They kept Auburn in it, and it kind of goes back to the offense. If Auburn just had average offense Saturday night, they probably win.
Yeah, you're right. And I mean, I feel like that's been the case for the last several years. I can remember times in the Gus Malzahn offense, same situation where Gus Malzahn comes in and he's, this offensive guru, which we, of course, saw that 2010, and we saw that with his Arkansas team in 06, 07, whichever year it was. But it ended up being the defense that was a strong suit, the Kevin Steele defense that was really keeping Auburn in games, and the offense just could not execute. But yeah, I mean, I've been surprised with the level of play, especially with Marcus Harris. That was one guy I was talking with our other writers before the game. And I said, Marcus Harris is going to be the guy that's going to disrupt Jackson Dart. He's going to disrupt Ulysses, and he's going to disrupt Quinshawn Judkins as well. That's going to be the guy on the defensive front. And if he pushes them back out, then of course you've got Jalen McLeod. He had a couple really big hits in that game too. Jalen Simpson, not as much of a factor as we have seen him before, but the defensive backs, Nehemiah Pritchett coming in having a really good game. Zion Puckett getting an interception. Donovan Kaufman kind of getting back into it, known more for his pass rushing ability, but he came in, got an interception as well, and got into the backfield as well. So the defense has plenty of talented players that will help them get there. But if they can ever get the quarterback wide receiver situation figured out, even Jarquez Hunter, he had the best game of the season, but it was still not where you expect Jarquez Hunter to be. I think he was still held to under 100 yards, I think right at 90, 91 yards, I believe. So even he's not performing to the level that Auburn fans expect him to. But, I mean, I agree with you there. You have an average outing. You have Peyton Thorne throwing for maybe 150, 160 yards. Then Auburn may win that ball game or possibly even lose by as less of a field goal. So the defense is doing their job, but when they have to do the entire thing, things tend to get a little slippery out there.
Yeah, I just feel like this team just defensively doesn't have the depth right now to kind of go wire to wire defensively like that. They're going to wear down, and we saw it in the fourth quarter. We constantly have to be back there on the field. And then looking at what they got next, got Mississippi State this Saturday, 2:30 game. Mississippi State, I watched the game against Arkansas, Taylor. That was a hard watch. They did win 7-3. You got to feel like good, though, if you're Auburn. You're going to be at home again. If they don't have Will Rogers once again, you got to feel good about Auburn's chances. You feel like they put up enough offense. I feel like you win this game. You get the 4-40 and you go to Vandy. You should beat Vanderbilt. That's 5. And then you got New Mexico State. And that's 6 wins. And who knows what the state of Arkansas is going to be at. They just fired Dan Enos, their offensive coordinator. So you look at that. I see 6 wins here, especially if you beat Mississippi State on Saturday.
Yeah, that's kind of how I see it working out too. Mississippi State. A lot of people wanted Mike Wright as the quarterback over Will Rogers. I'm like, how in the world, with as great of a passer as Will Rogers is, how do you even say something like that? And I think we saw that against Arkansas the other day. A lot of people were calling for former Auburn linebacker and former Auburn coach Travis Williams just to go ahead and overtake the Arkansas program because of how great his defense played as opposed to what Arkansas's offense did. And, looking at some of the numbers, I mean, Auburn fans, tend to look at how, rough the season has been offensively. And I agree, we just talked about that, some of the gripes that you and I both have with the Auburn offense, but Arkansas is that much worse. You have Auburn coming in at number 13, I believe, with 337, I believe, is their average. Arkansas has just over 300 yards that they average an entire week, and that's unacceptable when you have KJ Jefferson as your quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
No, Rocket Sanders has, kind of been in and out of the lineup. He's been out more than he's been in, but when you have those two guys and the receivers that he has to choose from, that's just unacceptable. And, who knows what Kenny Guyton's going to do as the offensive coordinator at Arkansas to round out the year. But you have to think that if something doesn't get, if they don't turn things around immediately, then Auburn's going to have a pretty good shot. And they're going to feel really good going in with possibly a 2-game winning streak as they take on Mississippi State and Vanderbilt over the next 2 weeks, and things should be working out with that too. But yeah, I mean, I possibly see a 7-5 season coming in. I'm with you. I think the Arkansas game is really going to hinge on what their morale is like. But if they're, go ahead and packing it in and let's go watch Muss and the boys basketball, I see Auburn going 7-5. May not be the prettiest 7-5 that we've seen, but hey, taking a look at where Auburn was last year, even at the beginning of, or really the Mississippi State game 2 years ago, where they blew that 28-3 lead or whatever it was, and that's kind of where the turn started. If you look at where they were at 2 years ago, and Auburn getting a 7-5, knowing the struggles that they had and knowing the players on the roster that Hugh Freeze doesn't have yet, I think at the end of the day, everyone's going to be a little excited about that. And I know I would be going in at 7-5, but hey, 6-6, that's a huge step up from where they were a year ago too. So if they can limp through to that and get a bowl eligibility bowl bid, then yeah, I think you got to be happy about that. And of course, the recruiting class coming in, if Freeze can find a way to have another great transfer portal haul as he did in the short time that he had from when he was hired in November to spring practice, and you got to feel pretty good about where Auburn is recruiting wise. The high school kids that came in last week are pretty excited about what's going on. If you can just find a way to keep them sold on Auburn, then things are going to look really good over the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, most definitely. So I think right now you see 3-4. If you're an Auburn fan, you say, "Oh wow, the season's not going away." But like I said, Mississippi State, Vanderbilt next 2 weeks, you win those, you're 5-4. You got New Mexico State, and then, like we said, Arkansas. So 7-5, 7 wins is still a possibility with this team, which I kind of think where a lot of people was kind of looking at for this season, anyways. But Taylor, it's been fun talking all things Auburn football with you. I'm sure we'll do this a few more times throughout the season. Hey, basketball's about to get started up in a few weeks as well, so we'll have that to chat about too as well. But if the listeners or viewers want to check you out, where can they find you?
You can check out all of our work at auburnwire.usatoday.com. Today, we, of course, talked about what Hugh Freeze said at his press conference. We took a look at what ESPN is saying about Auburn's projected finish. They're expecting Auburn to win 3 of the next 4 games that they play, which is a pretty optimistic feeling for Auburn fans. Over the next couple of weeks, of course, we'll dive into Mississippi State, several of the players you need to watch, several things that Zach Arnett is saying going in to the week, a little series history, and everything that you can think of Auburn, Mississippi State coverage-wise. Our team is going to be putting all that together at auburnwire.usatoday.com. If you're on social media, of course, on Facebook, search the Auburn Wire, and on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, at the Auburn Wire. So be sure to check us out and get your Auburn Mississippi State fix this week.
Absolutely, it's going to be an interesting week with that coming up, and everybody go check out the Auburn Wire for all the latest coverage of the Auburn Tigers. And Taylor, once again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Hey, as always, it was a blast, Phillip. Thanks for having me on, and we look forward to talking with you again down the road.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Wiregrass Daily News Sports. You can find the podcast over at wiregrassdailynews.com or wherever you get your podcasts. If you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review, and I will read it on a future edition of the show. And if you just leave 4 stars, you are just a straight up hater. You can follow me on social media over at PJordanSEC. You can email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com.